Hi, everybody. Welcome to another postdoc webinar. I'm David Bradshaw, your postdoc association president, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. This is a co-creation between FAU's Postdoc Association and the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs. So remember that you are in webinar mode, so you're not going to have audio or visual functions that you can turn on. But if you want to ask a question of our speaker, please use the Q&A button down at the bottom, and I will look through those questions and ask our speaker those questions at the end of her presentation. And our speaker today, I'm very happy to welcome, is Dr. Susan Dennett. She's had more than 20 years of international industry experience working as human resources and training director for organizations such as the Cummins Engine Company, ABB, and Lionel Trains. 11 years ago, she transitioned into academia, administration, and teaching, and she currently serves as an instructor with the Department of Educational Leadership and Research Methodology in FAU's College of Education. Welcome, Dr. Dennett. I'll leave the floor to you.
Thank you so much, David, for that nice, warm welcome. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here, and thank you so much for joining me. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see my presentation. Okay. And I'm so delighted that you're here with me today. And let's see, I'm sorry, I'm just going to, my screen's not moving. I'm going to stop sharing just a moment and go back to it. Bear with me just a moment. Okay, that's better. All right. So I hope this webinar will be helpful to you. I know some of you are just starting on your career journey. Some of you may be in the middle of your journey, just thinking about making a career change. And some of you may just be interested in this webinar and what we have to discuss. And so today, what I'd like to do is just share my own journey and my stories about how I've developed my own transferable skills and what they are. And you'll leave today with 3 action items that hopefully you can use to develop your own skills and identify what they are. And then I'll also share some resources that have been really useful as I've been going along my career. And so as David mentioned, I do work on the FAU Florida Jupiter campus. And for those of you who are joining me from overseas, perhaps some of my UK colleagues, we're just located on the East Coast, just north of West Palm Beach. And I work in the Educational Leadership and Research Methodology Department in the College of Education. And so you may wonder, what brought me over here and how did I make that journey over to America and in particular Florida and FAU. And so I'm going to share my story a little bit with you. And I grew up in the UK in a small market town called Daventry, Northamptonshire. And it's roughly about 60 miles north of London. And so I was living there for most of my life. And then towards the last part of my years in the UK, I lived in Plymouth, Devon, which is in the southwest. And then I came over here to sunny Florida. Have you ever been asked, do you remember when you were a child and people would say to you, so what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? And so when everybody asked me that question, I always said, I want to be a teacher. I want to be a teacher. And I seemed to be very sure in knowing what I wanted to do. However, when it became time, back then in the UK, to be a teacher, you had to go to teachers training college, which was about 4 years. And I really didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go to college for 4 years. So wait until I tell you the educational journey. So back then, when I finished comprehensive school in the UK, And this is very much like high school over in the US. I went on to the Northampton College of Education and earned a certificate in business studies. And in the UK then, it wasn't that common to go to university. Some people did go to university, but some people would go to a technical college. Some people would work in a company and the company would give them a day release to go to college 1 day a week. Some may be on like an apprenticeship program, and others may just leave and work. And so I went to Northampton College, and I was there for 2 years, and it was full time. It was 9 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock at night, and I had classes nonstop with 10-minute breaks in between. And then I earned the certificate. And after that, I started work. And then while I was in human resources, I decided to obtain my CIPD. It's a Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. And that was another couple of years. And with exams at the end, I remember on exam day, it was about 5 hours. I had to go to this huge hall, sitting at a little desk. And it makes me sound very antiquated, but we didn't have the computers there. We were actually writing our essay answers. So all the questions were essays. And I think I remember writing, it must have been at least 20 pages with my cartridge pen, because I felt it would make my writing more legible so the examiners could read it. But I still remember that. Then I went on to the Open University in the UK to work on my degree. And basically that was, I would work on the assignments, I'd read my books, work on the assignments, mail through the post office mail, my assignments to the teacher. They would read them, review them, write feedback all on the papers and mail them back to me. So it would be like a 3 or 4 week process of sending it back, reading the feedback, sending it back and forward. So that was quite interesting. Then I transitioned over to the US. And I was working, and I went to Oakland University up in Michigan in Rochester Hills, and I earned a bachelor's in psychology. And actually, I was able to transfer 2 of my years of college over to Oakland, so that was quite good. And I played on the tennis team. So, some of the skills I was learning at the time too, apart from the technical skills, were, being a team player as a college athlete, having to balance my time, as all you, I'm sure, do the same as well, especially being a postdoc, and balancing multiple projects at the same time. When I moved to Florida, I went to Florida State University and earned a master's in adult education and human resources. And then I actually earned my PhD here at Florida Atlantic University in educational leadership and research methodology. So go Owls. And remember when I said I didn't want to go to teachers training college for 4 years? And I sort of added up. I thought, well, gosh, how many years did I actually do? And it's about 12 and a half years of education I ended up doing. And I just think we never stop learning, do we? It's just a constant lifelong learning. And you probably won't be surprised that I actually am thinking about pursuing another PhD, but I'm still just considering it. So I wanted to share my background because I sort of made the transition from industry to academics, and it was a very non-traditional way of coming into academics. And I started off, remember, in the small market town of Daventry. I worked for Cummins Engine Company, which was one of the largest employers in Daventry. And I worked as a cost analyst. So basically what my job entailed was I was sitting at a desk with a calculator, costing engines and parts. So I would look at the cost of the, say, raw material, and then add on the labor, and then pass that on to the next person who would price it, add on a percentage, and come up with a price for the buyer. And this, if you can imagine, this big office with about 20 people all sitting with their calculators, working all day on their calculators. It was so quiet, and all you could hear was a click, click, click of the calculators. And if anyone walked in, everybody would look at them immediately, and I just thought, oh, this is not for me. It's a great company, but doing that type of work was just not really what I wanted to do. So I sort of stumbled into human resources. And these are just some of the jobs I just highlighted, but I worked for ABB, SC Brown Boveri, down in Plymouth, Devon, and its headquarters was in Switzerland. And I worked as a training and human resource manager. Really loved it. Again, I could transfer some of my skills from being a cost analyst into the HR, working with all the numbers, looking at the cost of labor. And so it was surprising how I could transfer those skills over. When I moved over to the US, I worked for Lionel Trains up in Michigan and QVC here in Florida. And so every time I changed jobs, I kept thinking, okay, what skills am I bringing with me? I kept developing these transferable skills that, we can talk about in a minute. So then all the way through my career, I loved the training part of my job. I was training other staff members, developing other staff, and I really loved that training aspect of HR. And I really wanted to work in a university, but how was I going to make that break into academics? So one day I was in my neighborhood and I noticed a new neighbor moved in. And so I took him and his wife an orchid. I welcomed him to the neighborhood and his name was Dennis. And I said, oh, where do you work? And he said, oh, I work for Northwood University. And I said, oh, I'd love to work for a university. I really want to teach in a university. And he said, oh, well, if ever anything comes up, I'll let you know. And so, probably a year and a half went by and, we would chat. And then one day he came, knocked on my door and said, hey, Susan, we have an adjunct position to teach HR and management. Would you be interested? And oh gosh, boy, did I jump at that chance. I said, yes, absolutely. I'd be so interested. And so that got me into teaching. And again, although I hadn't worked in academics before, just those skills that I had of knowing about learning ways, different learning theories, learning outcomes, developing curriculum, teaching and trying to share knowledge with others, that transferred very easily over to the academic world. And, have you ever been somewhere that you said, oh, I love the feel of this place and I really, really want to work here? I did. I loved the campus and I just loved the feel of the whole place. It was just a wonderful experience. And I said to Dennis, hey, Dennis, I really would love to work here full time. What do I need to do to work here full time and teach? And he said, well, Susan, you need a PhD. If you're going to teach here, you need a PhD. So I said, okay, I'm on it. And that's when I embarked on my PhD journey with FAU. So, 3 years go by and I've probably got another year to do. And there were no positions to teach becoming available, but a position of academic dean became available. And I kept looking at the job description thinking, oh, I could do that job. I could do that job. I've got those skills. But then there was that one little line that said academic experience preferred, and I looked at it and thought, well, I've got some academic experience, but I haven't worked in administration before. And, sometimes we don't apply for something if we think we're just not totally perfect for the job. And there's actually research out there that supports that too. A couple of people approached me and said, oh, you should apply for that job. You should apply. And it wasn't until the interim academic dean came up to me and said, I think you should submit your CV, that I did. I submitted my CV, and probably after about 8 interviews later and probably 2 or 3 months, it was a very long process, I was offered the position of academic dean. And, if I had known what I know now and what I knew once I was in the job, how easily my skills from HR transferred over to academia, I would never have dithered around and waited to apply. I would have just applied and had more confidence with it. And, I loved the position. I worked there for about 3 years very happily. But remember, I'd always said I wanted to be a teacher, and I really wanted to teach. And when a position became available with FAU, I'd already been teaching a little bit with FAU as an adjunct. I decided to move from administration into teaching full time, and you know, I love it. And just some of the transferable skills, say from industry to academics, you know, when you look at, so working with the HR background, I had employee issues that easily transfer over to a university setting. Yes, the setting may be different, the product may be different, but the way we handle issues and employee issues still really the same way, you know, and managing the budgets and how employees are motivated. Again, the setting may be different, but it's just knowing how each person could be motivated differently, and just knowing how to get to know them and do that. And also even the way we handle problems. And so even though the problems might be different between, I mean, some of them were, some of them weren't really, between an industry setting, say an engineering company, and a university setting, the way we approach problems are still the same. So the way I approached the problems was still the same, you know, looking at different points of view, analyzing and talking with different people and coming up with a solution. So those skills were easily transferable from industry to academics. And then just with the employee training and development, you know, knowing the learning differences, knowing how to instruct and developing other people, those skills transferred over very, very nicely, as well as conflict resolution. And boy, all those writing policies, you know, after writing with our dissertations, you know, we're very good at writing, that's for sure. So let's talk a little bit about transferable skills and what they are. And basically, these are any abilities that you can transfer from various environments, regardless of the industry and the setting. These are all your life and work experiences. And I know some of you here are from all different experiences. You've had different jobs. Some of you haven't had a job. You've worked on your dissertation research, different types of research. Maybe you've volunteered in your church or a nonprofit group. I know some of my students may be here and you've maybe worked in group settings in your courses. You've worked on projects, and yes, your postdocs, you've written dissertations. Let's not discount those 3.5, 4, 5 years of experience of doing that. And all these are very unique to you, and they make you who you are. And these are your personal skills that you can take with you. You can put in your handy dandy suitcase there and carry them from job to job. And it's really important to know what they are, what your skills are, so that you can talk about them to other people. And these can make you competitive in today's market. I just wanted to share with you some general examples of transferable skills. And you know, as we look at this list, I want you to just think about examples from your own world, you know, from what you've done. You may have captained a sports team, or as I said, worked in a church or volunteered. Think about what you've done and how have these examples, how do they relate to your transferable skills? Start making a list of them. Maybe just get a pen right here now and just jot some of these as you look at this list. You know, if we look at interpersonal skills, communication, you know, you've been working on your dissertation, and you've written, you write and write and write, and you modify and proofread, and you've had to communicate with your committee and present. So I know, and even on a sports team, you develop those interpersonal skills. Think about times when you may have been open-minded and thought about other people's point of view. You know, you may have received, I'm sure you've received feedback on your dissertation work, and we have to be open-minded. So I want you to think about tasks and how they translate to skills that you know you can take away with you. to other jobs. And I'm not talking about technical skills. I'm talking about these soft skills that employers are looking for. And adaptability, and boy, have we adapted over the last year and a half. And critical thinking skills, and think about when you've had to solve a problem and how did you approach it. Again, settings vary, but the way we approach problems and make decisions are very, very similar. And these are soft skills that you need to showcase to potential employers. And you can see I've mentioned international experiences. And some of you may have had international experiences. You may have gone on study abroad programs. You may be from a different country like me. You may have traveled. You may have friends who are from different countries. Think about the skills that you acquire when you're talking with people from different countries, or you've been in another country. Problem solving and being adaptable. And just one of my earlier jobs, I want to tell you this little story. I decided to resign and I wanted to travel the world for a year. So I said to my boss, David, David, I'm resigning. Here's my month's notice, because then in England, we had to give 1 month's notice. And I said, I want to travel the world and learn, And so he said, okay. So he went off and talked to his the CEO. And they came back a couple of hours later and they said, oh, Susan, you know what? We'd like you to think about this offer. Go off for 16 weeks and we'll hold your job open. And then you can come back and return to your job. And I think what they were hoping for, that I would get it out of my system. And it seemed like a good deal. And so I took it and I went off for 16 weeks. And I did get it out of my system a little bit. I went back to my job. I always did want to travel, and I continued to travel because we would have like 6 weeks vacation a year in England. So it sort of was conducive for traveling. But while I was on my international experience, I went to India, Nepal, Thailand, and Malaysia, and just backpacked on my own, just backpacked around. And so I came back with so many skills that I was able to talk about in job interviews. I could talk about problem solving and decision making, learning how to communicate in countries where no one spoke English. And I remember once I was in Bangkok, and I was at the bus station ready to get on a bus. And all the buses were in Thai. They had Thai writing for the destination. And I absolutely couldn't tell where they were going. There must have been like 50 buses around me. And so what I did was I approached people who were in the bus station and I showed them my ticket. And it was written with Thai language. And so they would take me to the bus, put me on the bus, show me my seat. And sometimes, if I was lucky, they would give me a sandwich to carry on my bus journey. It was just really lovely. But the point of this is there was just so many skills that I learned while I was away, and also just understanding different cultural points of view, knowing what I should wear, what I shouldn't wear, what I should say, what I shouldn't say, how I should behave, and just learning all about different customs. And so they're skills that are very important to employers. So think about even experiences like that. I mentioned adaptability in the last 18 months, and gosh, we've been so adaptable over the last 18 months with COVID. And so I'd like you also to think about the situational timely skills, what's happening in the world around us. And certainly the last year and a half, we've all worked from home. We've learned to adapt, how to work at home and manage, how to communicate remotely, to work in groups remotely, and how to handle multiple projects because, oh, by the way, we may have families at home and some have children who are trying to navigate the school system online as well. So I know everybody has adapted and been so flexible and navigated around and prioritized and learnt new computer systems. So let's not discount what we've all been learning over the last 18 months. And and how does what you did, how do they translate to skills that you can actually showcase for other people as well. And I know a lot of you are postdocs, and I found this information that I thought was really helpful from the University of Toronto. And I have a resource page towards the end that I've got the website where I located these. But they were talking about skills that they feel are important when you're working on your dissertation research. And so they talk about, forecasting and predicting. You designed an experiment. You thought about alternatives, and you came up with conclusions, and you had ideas, and you had to manage your time. You had to give presentations to your committee, and you gathered data, and you wrote and you wrote and you wrote and you collaborated. So we can't disregard these skills that you've spent 3.5 years, 4 years or so working on. They're really important, and they need to be showcased to potential employers as well. Now, I mentioned that I was going to leave you with action items. And so action item number 1, and this is a table that I drafted for my own research. And I thought you might be able to do something like this. I did it in Excel, where it's very easy to add and delete and move around. So you could make one just like this. And this is based on my research on critical thinking skills of students. And so in the transferable skills column, I put, and these are just a few, I'm analytical. I had to analyze. And it's funny, in one of my first jobs, I remember somebody saying, Susan, you really need to be a bit more analytical. And so I wish I could go back and say, boy, I am analytical now. I grew that skill. And I know you all did too. And I discovered and project management, I had to set deadlines and timelines. And especially when I acquired the job as academic dean with Northwood University, I hadn't finished my PhD. They gave me a year to finish it. I was 3 years into it. And I actually did finish in 3.5 years, 6 months before they asked me to. But I had to really manage my time there, starting a new job. So it's important to list those skills and just show, okay, this is what I did, and this is how they translate to another position. Communication, open-mindedness, I had to consider alternatives, and then consistently proofing my dissertation for accuracy. So I'd like you to perhaps create something like this. You can add on any jobs that you've had and projects that you've worked on, and you'll end up with a huge, huge list. And I mean, you don't have to make a table. You could make it any way you like. I used to love mind mapping. And I actually met Tony Buzan, the guru of mind mapping, back in England. And I remember leaving his conference and looking at all my study notes and converting them from lines to mind maps. And I really absolutely loved using those. Now they've got programs that you can use mind mapping, but some of you might want to do that. And the box, oh gosh, I hate it when people try and put you in a box. Has anybody tried to put you in a box? They'll say, oh, you can only work in industry, or you can only work in engineering, or you can only work in healthcare, or you can only work in academics, you can only teach. And people like to put you in a box. And I was working in HR, and I did the same. I wanted to say, okay, this person has worked in healthcare. And it's hard not to avoid putting somebody in a box, but really we've got to try and avoid that and talk about those transferable skills you have. Oh, you've worked in academics. Oh yeah, you probably can only work in academics. I actually do have a friend who somebody did say that to her once, and she can work in industry too, but you say, oh, well, I can see how you might think that, but let me tell you about the skills that I think would transfer very nicely over to industry, or vice versa. And also as you as a hiring manager, also have that mindset too. Avoid that box mentality. Oh, I really love this website, and I just thought it was a great resource to share with you. And this is the ONET Online, and it has lots and lots, hundreds actually, of job descriptions for any type of job. You type in your job title, and it comes up with the job description, the skills and abilities. And I've actually, on the next page, I've got an example of this. And so I typed in the word researcher as a job title, and this is just a snapshot of part of it. And you can see it comes up with the abilities believed for a researcher to be able to do. And you can put in any job title here. And inductive reasoning, the ability to combine pieces of information to form conclusions. And as postdocs, you definitely have done this. Think about the oral expression and oral comprehension. When you were presenting your research, you're the subject matter expert, but not everybody on your committee probably was. So I know you had to communicate with your committee, and when you were presenting, have to sort of speak in a language that they could understand. And so if you go through this list, it's a good way of getting the verbiage to help you with your CV. And, you can put the words into your own words when you're making up your CV or your cover letter. So that is really a great place to go. And that leads me to action item number 2. I would like you to try and do this. Go to ONET and type in various job titles that you may be interested in, and just look at the skills and abilities and try and align what you've done with those skills and abilities and come up with a common language. And then also I'd like you to look at job ads and see what skills are needed there for the type of job that you're interested in. A good place to start looking is Indeed.com. And you can put in the job title and see what types of jobs come up and what employers are looking for as well. And you can go to organization websites and look at the organization's mission statement, their values, and any jobs that they have. And you can look at the language and look at the skills that they are looking for, and just see where your skills and your experience, your professional experience, your educational experience, and the international experience, where they align with that prospective job there. Then finally, with action item number 3, you want to share your journey with prospective employers, your international journey, your doctoral research, any skills that you have, and highlight these. Use social media to highlight your skills. Some of you may have a LinkedIn profile. Use that, include your skills in your profile. Put them in your resume and your cover letter. And when you're looking at a job, one size doesn't fit all. The resume and the cover letter, they need to be tailored to that particular job. So you're constantly tweaking. You don't just, and I know you probably know this, you don't just send off a very general cover letter or the same CV for every single job. You want to tailor it to the type of job you're looking for. And they're advertising for, and the language that they use. You tailor your language to match their language. Think about your personal website and any networking opportunities. Remember how I started working for Northwood University? It was really through my neighbor. I happened to go over there with an orchid. He'd just moved in. And while we were talking, I mentioned, I'd love to work in the university. And it happened. It didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. And so my advice here is let people know the type of job that you're looking for. Let the doctor and the dentist and your colleagues know. Just say, hey, I have these skills and I'm looking for this type of job. And I wondered if you had any advice for me. And sometimes they'll say, well, yeah, I don't know anybody, but I bet you my friend who works at XYZ company might know. And networking is so, so important. And when we talk about the interview, and I know I could talk about an interview for hours here, but I want you to visualize your interview. Imagine you've got the interview now, you're going for your interview, and you anticipate what type of questions you're going to be asked. and you sort of visualize it in your mind. And generally, employers will ask behavioral type questions. Tell me about a time when you demonstrated problem-solving skills. And you can say, oh, yes, absolutely. And so have these ready to go, think about them, write them down. And I don't know if any of you have played sports. I play a lot of tennis. And when I'm playing tennis, I constantly visualize. So if I'm going to serve, I will visualize a good serve, where I'm going to toss the ball and where that ball is going to land, right in the corner to possibly that person's backhand. And so visualization is really, really powerful. And think about the interview. That's very important, to practice and prepare. And I mentioned I would include some additional resources. Some of these are the ones I've already talked about, and some of them are new, but they're resources that I thought might be very helpful. And so you could either take a picture of this here, or I think we're sharing the PowerPoint. I know we're sharing the video, so I think they're worth a look, and just see if you can gain some additional information here. And so it's just important to remember you're valuable. You've got a lot of skills to offer to employers. The setting and the product may be different, but the way you handle situations, the way you approach problems, the way you communicate with others, the way you analyze situations won't leave you. You'll constantly be developing them along the way. It's just a case of identifying what are your transferable skills and how do you showcase them to your possible employers, and knowing that you can take them with you. You can pack them in that handy dandy pink suitcase, take them with you, and continue to develop them. And this is really all I have to say. I shared my stories with you just to demonstrate I have made that transition from industry to academics. I feel comfortable I could transition back, or if I'd started in academics, I feel comfortable I could transition to industry. And it's just knowing what our skills are and how they can translate. So I would like to thank you all for being here, and I wish you all the success as you embark on your career journey. And please keep in touch. If you see a job that you're interested in and you just want to talk about it and maybe share your transferable skills, I put my email here, and you're always welcome to email me later on, even if it's in a year's time. You're very welcome to do that. And so thank you for sitting here. I wish I could see your faces and wave to you, but I can't. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I think we have time for questions. So I'm going to hand on over to my partner there, David. Hey.
Hi, Susan. That was great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We do have a couple questions. One actually came in towards the beginning. The question is, how do you lead a research project without being experienced, without having previously published? How would you suggest somebody kind of go about that?
Right, good question too. And I think, I did that too. I didn't have any experience, and I needed to work on my research project. And I think I approached it the way I've approached everything, really, just reaching out to other people, and with the research project, I reached out to people who had experience, in research. I reached out to a colleague who was from another country, because I was doing research with China too. So I reached out to him to get his information. I'm not an expert in quantitative research, so I reached out to a statistician. And I still do that now, every time. That was my very first, when I worked on my dissertation research, that was my first research experience. And that's how I handled that. And even now, as I'm working on other research, I do the same. I've got a very good colleague, Dr. Dodano, who's a wonderful statistician. and I reach out to him and partner with him on research. And I've learned from him. You know, I remember telling, when I got the job at Northwood University, I remember telling my potential boss, I'm a really good student. You know, I may not have worked in academia before, but I can learn. And everywhere I went, I used to take my, I don't think I've got it here, a big pad, and I would make notes, you know, and I still carry pads with me today to make notes. So, you know, when Michael talks, I always make notes. Okay, and I learn about how to do quantitative analysis. So I really think it's just reaching out to the people who can help you, and they do want to help you. I mean, everybody does, but it's really reaching out and asking for guidance.
Thank you. Somebody asked a question about imposter syndrome, which is something I know I have a problem with as well. So how do you kind of get over imposter syndrome, that self-doubt, that rationality that you know you qualify, but you don't know you can actually do it?
I know. And I don't think, David, that ever goes away. You know, even before today's presentation, I was thinking, you know, I was a bit nervous, you know, and as I am before all presentations and new jobs. And I do suffer from imposter syndrome. And especially since I've changed careers and taken jobs that I haven't had the experience. Like when I first got into HR, I was a really good student, and I read and I read and I read. So when situations came up, I was able to handle them just from being book smart. Really, that's how I started. But I always felt like I didn't really belong. You know, oh, one day they'll find out that I've never worked in HR before. But it's hard. And I still have it, and I don't think that goes away. But I just think it's important to really learn about the job. You know everything you can about it. And even starting a new job, you know, just reaching out to the different departments and learning about if it's a product or if it's a university. I remember when I started at Northwood, I went and met every single department to just learn about what they do. And even then I thought, gosh, you know, they gave me this job, and can I really do it? But once I was in there, I thought, oh, if I knew how it transferred over as easily as it did. I mean, there were so many good people around me that I did lean on. We can't discount them because they were really, really helpful. But I don't think you ever get away from the imposter syndrome, but it's just a way of dealing with it and learning about the company, and just then you feel prepared. You know, even before this presentation, I prepared and I practiced and I leaned on my experience, but, you know, I did feel, I always feel it. And I think also, and I hate to bring up the woman part of it, but I know there's research out there to say sometimes women do not go after jobs because they don't have all the skills. They don't think they have all the skills, and really they do. And maybe somebody out there, one of the members of the audience, should do a study on that, and I'll be the first to sign up for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, talking about going, somebody else has a question along these lines. You have that job description that you have. There's a bunch of specific skills you actually don't have. Like even if it's a transferable skill or something like that, but it's not something like technical skills that you have for the job. Kind of what's the best way about going about addressing that in the interview? Is it okay to say you're not proficient, that you're willing to learn, or ask if they provide training? How do you address those specific skills that you don't have that aren't transferable?
Yeah, so I'm thinking they could be technical. I mean, sometimes, and depending what they are, I mean, sometimes you can't, I mean, if it's an engineering job and you're coming in and you have to be an engineer, it's hard if you're not. That, you know, we can't get away from that. But trying to think here. I mean, once in one of my positions with Lionel Trains, actually, I worked with a lot of engineers and Cummins Engine Company. We would, and I'm just thinking about engineers because it's sort of very specific. And I remember I had an engineer just walk in the door one day into our building and say, I really want to break into technical writing. And we actually had a job for a technical writer, and she just came in off the street. I hadn't even advertised it. I was just thinking, okay, I'm going to advertise it. I hadn't advertised it. And she said, I'd like to be a technical writer, but I've never done the job before. And I was looking at the job description thinking, well, technical writing experience. And even though she hadn't done the job, I thought, I'd worked with engineers for years. So I knew she was very capable of doing that job as a technical writer, because basically the engineers would write down, their notes about, with Lionel Trains, it was basically assembling Lionel trains, the cute little big trains that ran around, and they were quite difficult, having had a couple myself. So she actually did get the job. I was able to offer her the job. I mean, she did go through the hiring process with the engineering VP and all that, but and she was very bold, and she told me, I haven't been a technical writer. I'm an engineer. And she was honest. And I do think, I think honesty and just being honest and saying, I haven't done that job before, but I know these are some of the skills I have. I've written, I've conceptualized ideas. This is why I think I can do the job. And I think I did the same with Northwood University. I said, no, I haven't actually. I mean, they knew, but I did admit it. I haven't worked for a university before. I've worked for you in teaching. And if they did ask me a question that I hadn't had that situation, I said, I haven't had that exact situation, but if I did, this is how I would handle it. Gotcha. And that went well. So I do think it's worth being honest, but also in the same time, saying how you could do that job.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. I came upon that situation as well with this job. And I just said, I honestly don't have experience in that, but I am very willing and want to learn.
Yes.
Enthusiasm for learning, I think, will always be helpful in any position.
Yeah, I mean, I also worked too, David, and I didn't put it here, but I worked for Marriott, the Marriott Corporation, and when we hired, we actually didn't care if somebody didn't have the technical skills of, say, working in a restaurant or working in a bar. We knew that we could train those skills. What we did look for was really willing to be nice and kind to people and have good customer service. That's what we looked for. And training the other skills that could come later. But what was first was always, is this person naturally kind and wanting to help others?
Is that something you kind of suggest people highlight in interviews, kind of your positive interpersonal skills like that you work well with others and everything like that?
Yeah, especially, depending on the industry. So if somebody's going into hospitality industry, that's dealing with the guests and, wanting them to have a great guest experience. So clearly customer service and being kind and friendly and sociable, it would be important. So you think about the job that you're looking for, look at that job description. They'll have it in that job description. If you go to the company's website, they'll probably have that in their values statement too. So again, it's always tailoring your CV and your cover letter, because you want to get through that door. You want them to get a chance to have a look at you and talk to you. So your cover letter is very important to be tailored and customized to each position. And I think it's a mistake a lot of people make, because it is almost a full-time job looking for a job. To tailor, I tell you it is. And, you really have to make that cover letter stand out, and look at the language on the person's website, on the company website, look at the language in their job description, and tailor your letter and your CV to that particular job description. And then when you get the interview, you can go in and again, you've practiced, you've anticipated the questions, and generally people will ask you those behavioral type questions. Tell me a story. They want to know how you handled something. And then if you haven't handled it, you just say, well, I haven't had it, but this is what I would do,
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And when it comes to kind of tailoring your CV and such, is it like you see they have particular value on their website? Do you literally like use the words from the website in your CV? Is that going to be like too obvious to?
I might use my own words. Okay. Say if it's integrity, I might say doing the right thing, or change it. When I applied for the Northwood University job, I looked carefully at the mission and the values, and really talked a lot. My cover letter was quite long, and I know they say your resume should only be like 2 pages long, but I really think it's important to get what you want them to know about you in your cover letter. And yeah, so I probably wouldn't use exactly the same words. I would use my own words.
Okay, I got a long question here. So I think it may be dependent upon the country, as I had the experience, that flexibility, and having had different jobs at different places, and not really considered to be a plus, rather a disadvantage at a time of interview. So they had been at so many different places that it'd be considered a negative. In their home country, this is sometimes considered as difficult to keep up with stable position if you keep jumping from job to job. What would you suggest to kind of paint that in a positive light? They're still looking for their place, and they've worked in like 5 different countries. They've had to jump around a lot. How would you position that to be in a positive?
Yeah, I mean, it's different to how it used to be when, say, my dad was working. Then they'd stay with a company, for like 25 years, and it was a norm. And I think people do tend to, especially now, move around. I think it is really a lot more common, especially in industry. I honestly think in industry, people do expect you to move around. I mean, I would definitely posit that with. And how great actually to work in different countries and have that international experience. I mean, and I would definitely put that in a paragraph. I've been fortunate, to work in different countries, and I've learned different cultures, and I really appreciate all the different points of view. And so talk about that, and not, I probably wouldn't explain why I've moved around a lot. If it came up in an interview, then depending on the country, if it's a country where it sounds like the jobs kept finishing, so it wasn't this person's, they didn't change jobs voluntarily, I would say that too. In this country, this is how the job market is, and explain that. And I might explain that in the letter too, if it was a lot of different jobs, and if it was based on the country culture of the job market. But I think again, and I've had different positions. I didn't include everything I've done, but I've gone to different companies, and I do feel every time you make that change, you're bringing in your portable suitcase, so many good skills with you. So you're asking me who has moved around, and I sort of see it as a positive, really.
Thank you. So you meant with the Northwood University job, Did you name drop? Did you mention that you knew that person during the interview? Do you think that's helpful during interviews to kind of mention, so and so, or so and so kind of brought you to this position in a sense?
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. I didn't. Well, you see, I was working there too. I remember I
Right.
was an adjunct there too. So they already knew that I knew that person. Yeah, what I did do actually, um, I in my references, I did put a couple of people for my references who were on the board,
Mm.
and I didn't know them very well, and I was honest in the interview that I really don't know them very well. I know them because I met them. I asked them if there would be a reference, and then I went to meet them and talk with them, and they knew I was a hard worker. So I did sort of name drop there subtly as a reference. And then, in the interview, I was asked about it. And that's where I was honest and said, you know what, I really haven't known them a long time. I really thought it would be positive because I thought you might look at my CV twice. I did, I was honest. But I did think, did that kill my interview? But I did get the job, and I think being honest is important. But I mean, you can name drop subtly, it might be in your cover letter, you might say, oh, I was talking to Dennis, and he said this is a great place to work, and he thought I might be a good fit for your organizational culture. And so I'm just reaching out. I saw this position that I'm very interested in. So you could do it in a very subtle way.
Gotcha. And when it comes to those references and such, do you kind of guide them in any way? There's all these transferable skills that, like say, are in the job description and such. You kind of tell them, could you please talk about my teamwork skills, my leadership skills, my motivation skills, because that's what it says in the job description, or you kind of just let them go?
Well, what I do is, when I've used somebody for a reference, I'll call them or write to them and say, first, is it okay? And then I'll tell them what type of job it is, and what they may need to know. Generally, that's what I'll do. I'll just say, it's this type of job. It's it's the academic dean's position, or I'm teaching. And they may ask you questions such as, does she have is she a good customer service? Does she have communication skills? I haven't led them too much, but it's not a bad idea, especially if that person can talk about those skills. Definitely if they can talk to the skills,
Well, I don't see any more questions, and we're almost at the hour. So
we are, yes.
Yes, it went by pretty quick. Okay. Well, if nobody has any other questions, thank you very much for your time. That was very helpful and very appreciative. And this was obviously recorded, so recording will be put up, and then we're sharing your PowerPoint as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.